The sun was setting over the barren plains of IV, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Stood on the rocky outcrop with her back against a boulder, her breathing heavy and her body covered in dust and blood. Most of the blood was not her own. She looked around at what remained of her unit. 12 soldiers had started this patrol mission with her at dawn. Now only 4 remained, and 2 of them could barely stand. The scourge had come from nowhere. One moment the patrol was crossing the empty plains on a routine sweep. The next moment the ground had erupted with hundreds of the raiders. They poured out of hidden tunnels like water bursting through a broken dam. Had ordered an immediate retreat to high ground, but the scourge were fast. So very fast. Now they were surrounded. The rocky outcrop gave them some advantage, forcing the scourge to climb up narrow paths instead of swarming from all directions at once. But that advantage was fading with every passing minute. The creatures were patient. They knew their prey had nowhere to go. Checked her communication device again. Nothing but static. The scourge were jamming all signals, cutting them off from any hope of rescue. No one knew they were here. No one was coming to save them. One of her soldiers, a young male named, crawled over to her position. His left arm hung useless at his side, broken in 3 places during the initial ambush. He held his weapon in his right hand, but could see he had only a few shots remaining. "Commander," he said, his voice weak but steady, "they are preparing another wave. I count at least 200 in the front group alone." Nodded. She had seen them gathering at the base of the outcrop. The scourge moved in patterns, clicking and chattering to each other in their strange language. They were organizing, planning. The next attack would be the final one. She looked down at her weapon. Empty. She had fired her last shot an hour ago. All she had left was her ceremonial combat spear, the weapon that had been passed down through her family for 7 generations. Her grandmother had carried it in the border wars. Her mother had used it during the siege of. Now held it in her hands, knowing it would be the last thing she ever held. "Tell the others to save their ammunition," she said to. "Make every shot count. When they run out, use whatever you can find, rocks, fists, teeth if you must." Managed a weak smile. "We will make them pay for every step, Commander." The scourge began their advance. They came up the rocky paths in a living wave of claws and mandibles, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dying light. Raised her spear and screamed a battle cry that her ancestors had used for 1,000 years. Her soldiers joined her, their voices mixing together in defiance. The first scourge reached the top and drove her spear through its chest. The creature fell backward, knocking others down with it. She pulled the spear free and struck again, then again, each blow fueled by desperation and rage. Around her, the last of her soldiers fought with everything they had. Weapons fired. Bodies fell. The air filled with the smell of blood and burning chitin. But there were too many. For every scourge that fell, 3 more took its place. Felt herself being pushed back, step by step, toward the center of the outcrop. Her arms burned with exhaustion. Her lungs screamed for air. But she kept fighting because stopping meant death. A massive scourge warrior climbed over the bodies of its fallen comrades and charged directly at her. This one was different from the others. Larger, stronger. Its armor was thicker and darker, marked with the scars of many battles. Met its charge with her spear aimed at its throat. The impact was terrible. The spear struck the creature's armor, and the ancient weapon that had served her family for generations shattered into pieces. The shaft broke in her hands. The blade went spinning away into the darkness. 7 generations of history destroyed in a single moment. The scourge warrior knocked her to the ground with a swing of its massive claw, rolled and tried to rise, but her body would not obey. She was too tired, too broken. She looked up at the creature as it raised its claw for the killing blow and thought of her mother, her grandmother, all the warriors who had come before her. She hoped she had made them proud. Then something streaked across the sky like a falling star. The scourge paused. Every single one of them stopped moving and looked upward, their antennae twitching in confusion. followed their gaze and saw a ball of fire descending from the heavens, growing larger with every heartbeat. It was coming down fast, very fast, and it was heading directly toward them. The impact shook the ground like an earthquake. A wave of dust and debris washed over the battlefield, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The Scourge scattered in panic, their formations breaking apart as they tried to understand what had just happened. Crawled toward a boulder and pulled herself up, squinting through the dust cloud at the crater that had appeared less than 50 meters from her position. Something moved inside the crater. Something was climbing out. The dust began to settle and saw a figure rising from the impact site. It was bipedal, roughly her height, wearing some kind of armor that was cracked and smoking from the descent. The creature stood upright and looked around at the battlefield with movements that seemed almost casual, as if crash landing in the middle of a war was nothing unusual. Had never seen anything like it. The shape was similar to her own species in some ways, but the proportions were different. The armor was unlike any design she recognized, and when the creature turned toward her, she saw a face that was completely alien. Soft skin, small eyes, a strange covering of fur on top of its head. The creature surveyed the hundreds of Scourge surrounding them. It looked at and her wounded soldiers. It looked down at its own damaged armor and seemed to consider the situation for a long moment. Then it spoke. The words meant nothing to, but the tone was unmistakable. It was asking a question, and somehow, despite everything, the creature sounded almost amused. Did not know what a human was. She did not know that this one was named Cole Bradley, or that his ship had been destroyed in orbit, or that his escape pod had malfunctioned and sent him plummeting to this exact spot on this exact planet at this exact moment. She did not know that humans were called by the rest of the galaxy, or that they had a reputation for surviving things that should kill them. All she knew was that the Scourge had stopped attacking, and that this strange creature from the sky was now standing between her and death. The human reached down and picked up a chunk of rock from the crater. He tested its weight in his hand, looked at the approaching Scourge, and said something else in his unknown language. Whatever he said, it sounded like a challenge. Cole Bradley had experienced some bad days in his 15 years as a Marine. He had been shot twice on station. He had survived a hull breach on the transport vessel Morning Light. He had once spent 3 days trapped in a collapsed building on a colony world while rescue teams dug through the rubble above him. But crash landing on an unknown planet in the middle of an alien battle was definitely making the top 5. His helmet display flickered with damage warnings. The armor's integrity was down to 40%. His left leg hurt in a way that suggested something was either broken or badly bruised. But he was alive, and right now that was enough. "Penny," he said to the artificial intelligence housed in his helmet, "where the hell are we?" The AI's voice came through with heavy static. "Working on it, Sergeant. Navigation systems are damaged. Based on stellar positioning, we appear to be in the system. Planet designation unknown. Atmosphere is breathable. That is the good news. And the bad news. We are surrounded by approximately 300 hostile organisms, and your primary weapon was lost during ejection. You have your sidearm with 24 rounds and your combat knife. Also, I am detecting 4 non-hostile life forms nearby who appear to be in significant distress." Cole looked at the creatures on the rocky outcrop. They were reptilian in appearance, with scaled skin in shades of blue and green. One of them, a female by her build, was watching him with an expression he could not read. She was covered in blood and holding the broken shaft of some kind of spear. Her companions looked even worse. These people had been fighting for their lives, and they were losing. The creatures, whatever they were, had recovered from their surprise. They were regrouping, forming into attack lines, clicking and chattering with what sounded like anger. Cole counted the ones he could see and stopped when he reached 200. There were more behind them, many more. 24 rounds, 4 wounded aliens, hundreds of enemies, terrible odds. Cole smiled. He had worked with worse. He walked toward the female alien, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. She tensed as he approached, raising the broken spear shaft like a club. Cole stopped a few meters away and held up his empty hands, showing her he meant no harm. "Hey there," he said, knowing she could not understand him. "Looks like you're having a rough day. Mind if I join the fight?" The alien said something in response. Her voice was surprisingly melodic, almost musical, but the meaning was completely lost on him. Still, she lowered the broken weapon slightly. That was progress. "Penny, can you translate?" "Working on it. Language patterns are unfamiliar, but I am building a database from contextual clues. Basic communication may be possible within a few hours." "We don't have a few hours." Cole pointed at himself. "Cole," he said clearly, then he pointed at her. "You." The alien seemed to understand. She touched her chest with one clawed hand. She said. Cole repeated. He pointed at the creatures. "Bad guys," he made a throat-cutting gesture. His eyes widened slightly. She nodded, a gesture that apparently meant the same thing in her culture as it did in his. Then she pointed at the creatures and spoke a word that sounded like venom in her mouth. "Scourge," Penny translated. "That appears to be the name of the hostile species." "Scourge," Cole repeated. "Okay, Scourge bad, got it." He turned to face the approaching horde and drew his sidearm. The weight of it was familiar in his hand, reassuring in a way that nothing else could be at this moment. 24 rounds would not be enough, not even close, but every shot would count, and he would make sure of that. The Scourge began their attack. They came in waves, scrambling up the rocky slopes with terrifying speed. Cole took aim and fired, and the first creature fell with a hole in its head. He fired again and again, each shot precise, each bullet finding its target. The years of training took over and his body moved on instinct while his mind stayed calm and focused. 6 shots, 6 kills. The Scourge kept coming. Cole moved to higher ground, putting himself between the aliens and the main wave of attackers. Shouted something and followed him, her broken spear raised for combat. Her remaining soldiers moved to support her, dragging themselves into position despite their wounds. 10 shots, 10 kills, still not enough. A Scourge warrior reached the top of the slope and lunged at Cole with its claws extended. He the attack and put a bullet through its skull at point-blank range. Another came from the left and he kicked it backward, sending it tumbling into the creatures climbing behind it. 15 shots, he was running out. Cole holstered the sidearm and drew his combat knife. The blade was only 20 centimeters long, but it was made from the finest steel Earth could produce. It had served him well in a dozen close-quarters fights. It would serve him well again. The next Scourge to reach him died with the knife in its throat. Cole pulled the blade free and slashed at another, opening a wound across its chest, appeared beside him and drove her broken spear shaft into a creature's eye. They fought back to back, two strangers from different worlds, united against a common enemy. Cole took a hit across his shoulder. The Scourge claw tore through his damaged armor and drew blood. He grunted in pain but did not stop. Another hit came across his thigh, then another across his ribs. He kept fighting. Watched him with growing amazement. The wounds he was taking would have killed any. But this creature, this human, refused to fall. He absorbed punishment that should have ended him and responded with attacks of his own. His movements were brutal and efficient, wasting no energy on anything unnecessary. The Scourge began to hesitate. They had expected easy prey. They had not expected this. Cole grabbed a dead Scourge by its arm and used the body as a shield, blocking the claws of 2 attackers before throwing the corpse at them. He picked up a rock and hurled it at another creature, striking it between the eyes. He fought with anything available, anything useful, turning the entire battlefield into his weapon. "Penny," he gasped between attacks, "any chance of rescue?" "I am detecting communication signals nearby. Military frequency, I believe. A relief force is searching for survivors. However, they cannot locate this position due to enemy jamming. Cole looked at. She was still fighting, still standing, but he could see exhaustion in her movements. Her soldiers were fatting too. They could not hold out much longer. Can you break through the jamming? Partially. I would need to boost the signal somehow. Perhaps if we could reach a higher elevation or find a way to amplify the broadcast. Cole looked across the battlefield at the distant hills. Between here and there, hundreds of scourge waited in the darkness. It seemed impossible, but impossible had never stopped him before. He turned to and pointed toward the hills. Then he pointed at himself and made a running motion. She seemed to understand because her eyes went wide and she grabbed his arm, shaking her head violently. Cole gently removed her hand and pressed his combat knife into her palm. She looked down at the weapon, then back at him, confusion and something else in her expression, something that might have been concern. "Hold the line," he said. "I'll be back." Then he charged directly into the scourge swarm. Screamed for him to stop, but the human was already gone. He plunged into the mass of scourge bodies like a stone thrown into dark water, disappearing from sight within seconds. She heard gunfire, then the sounds of struggle, then nothing but the clicking of mandibles and the shuffle of chitin against rock. She looked down at the knife in her hand. It was a simple weapon, nothing like the elegant spear her family had carried for generations. The blade was straight and practical, made for killing rather than ceremony. But it felt right in her grip, solid, dependable, like the human who had given it to her. Commander called out, "They are withdrawing." Looked up in disbelief. The scourge were pulling back from the outcrop, turning their attention toward something else, toward the human. She could see movement in the swarm, a disturbance traveling through the mass of bodies like a ripple across still water. Cole was still fighting, still alive. "Do we follow?" one of her soldiers asked. Shook her head. "No, we hold this position, that is what he wanted." She climbed to the highest point of the outcrop and looked out across the battlefield. The scourge were in chaos. Their formations had broken apart as they tried to deal with the single enemy that had charged into their midst. She could see flashes of movement, glimpses of the human's damaged armor as he fought his way through the swarm. He was heading for the hills, the high ground where signal boosters could work, where rescue might be possible. "Commander, look," said, pointing at the sky. Followed his gesture and saw lights in the distance. Ships, military vessels searching the area in a grid pattern. They were looking for survivors, but they could not find them. The jamming was too strong. They would search the wrong areas and eventually give up and leave. Unless Cole reached the hills, unless he could break through the jamming and guide them here. She understood now. The human was not running away, he was trying to save them all. A group of scourge broke away from the main swarm and started climbing toward the outcrop again. There were perhaps 50 of them, fewer than before but still far more than her wounded soldiers could handle. She raised the human's knife and prepared to meet them. "For the Dominion," she said. "For the Dominion," her soldiers echoed. The scourge attacked and threw herself into the fight. The knife was shorter than she was used to, forcing her to get closer to her enemies than she would have liked. But the blade was sharp and the edge held true. She cut and slashed and stabbed, painting the rocks red with scourge blood. Fought beside her despite his broken arm. He had abandoned his empty weapon and picked up a rock instead, using it to crush the skulls of any scourge that came within reach. The other 2 soldiers covered the flanks, fighting with the last of their strength. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours, lost track of time. The world narrowed to the next enemy, the next strike, the next breath. Her muscles burned with exhaustion. Her wounds ached with every movement. But she kept fighting because the human was counting on her. A scourge warrior grabbed her ankle and pulled her down. Fell hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The creature crawled on top of her, mandibles opening wide for the killing bite. She thrust the knife upward and the blade sank into the soft tissue beneath its jaw. The scourge shuddered and went still. Pushed the body off and struggled to her feet. More scourge were coming, always more. She raised the knife again. Then a new sound cut through the noise of battle. A high-pitched whine that grew louder and louder until it became a roar. Looked up and saw one of the military ships breaking away from the search pattern. It was heading directly toward them, weapons charging with a glow she could see even from this distance. The jamming was broken. Cole had done it. The ship opened fire on the scourge positions. Plasma bolts rained down like burning rain, incinerating dozens of creatures with each blast. The swarm scattered in panic, their coordination shattered by the sudden assault from above. More ships appeared, following the first, adding their weapons to the bombardment. Watched the destruction with a mix of relief and horror. The scourge were being annihilated. Within minutes, the battlefield that had been their death trap became a graveyard for the enemy instead. A transport ship descended toward the outcrop. Soldiers poured out before it even landed, securing the perimeter and rushing to help the survivors. Medical teams appeared with stretchers and equipment. Someone wrapped a blanket around shoulders and tried to guide her toward the transport. She pulled away. "The human," she said. "Where is the human?" The soldiers looked at each other in confusion. "What human?" Pointed toward the distant hills. "He went that way. He broke the jamming. You have to find him." The commanding officer of the relief force stepped forward. He was an older male named, a veteran of many campaigns. His expression was skeptical but respectful. "Commander, our scanners show no human life signs in this area. Are you certain of what you saw?" "I am certain. He crashed here in some kind of escape pod. He saved us. He saved all of us." Considered this for a moment, then nodded. "We will search. If this human exists, we will find him." Insisted on joining the search party despite her wounds. She led them toward the hills, following the path of destruction Cole had carved through the scourge swarm. Bodies lay everywhere, dozens of them, all killed by blade or bullet or bare hands. The soldiers around her grew quiet as they realized what they were seeing. One human had done this, one human against hundreds. They found him at the base of the hills, half buried under a pile of scourge corpses. His armor was shattered and stained with blood, both his own and that of his enemies. His sidearm lay empty beside him, its ammunition spent. His helmet was cracked and dark, the AI inside silent. Pushed through the soldiers and dropped to her knees beside him. She grabbed his shoulder and turned him over, terrified of what she would find. Cole's eyes opened. He looked up at her and, despite everything, managed a weak smile. "Hey," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Did we win?" Did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. She held up his knife, the blade now stained with scourge blood, and nodded. Cole's smile widened slightly. Then his eyes closed and he went limp in her arms. The medical teams rushed forward, pushing aside as they worked to stabilize him. She watched them carry him toward the transport ship, watched them hook up machines and inject fluids and do everything they could to keep him alive. He had to survive. After everything he had done, after all the impossible things he had accomplished, he had to survive. Looked down at the knife still clutched in her hand. She had never held a human weapon before. She had never met a human before today. But in the space of a few hours, this strange creature from another world had become more than an ally. He had become something else, something she did not yet have words for. She followed the transport ship back to base, the knife held close against her chest like a sacred relic. The military medical station was a maze of white corridors and humming machines. Had been there for 3 days, watching and waiting while the doctors did everything they could to save the human. They had never treated his species before. They did not know his biology or his limits or what medicines would help and what would harm. Everything was guesswork. But humans, they discovered, were remarkably hard to kill. Cole's wounds were extensive. multiple lacerations across his torso and limbs, a fractured collarbone, internal bleeding in 3 places, nerve damage in his left leg. Any one of these injuries would have been fatal to a. Combined, they should have killed him 10 times over. Instead, his body fought back. The bleeding stopped on its own. The fractures began to knit together. The damaged tissue regenerated at a rate the doctors had never seen. They ran tests and took samples and argued among themselves about what they were witnessing. Stayed by his side through all of it. She sat in a chair beside his bed and watched the monitors display his vital signs. She did not understand the numbers or the symbols, but she understood that each steady beat meant he was still alive, still fighting. On the 4th day, his eyes opened. Leaned forward, her heart pounding. Cole blinked several times, confusion clear on his face as he tried to understand where he was. His gaze wandered around the room, taking in the alien architecture and the unfamiliar equipment. Then his eyes found her and something changed in his expression. Recognition. Relief. He said. His voice was rough and weak, but he remembered her name. She touched his hand gently. Cole. A crackle of static came from the table beside his bed. Looked over and saw his damaged helmet, the one the recovery team had brought back with him. A small light was blinking inside it. Sergeant Bradley, a female voice said from the helmet. Good morning, or good evening. I am not entirely certain of local time conventions. Cole turned his head toward the sound. Penny, you're still working. Barely. My systems suffered significant damage during the crash and subsequent combat. However, I have had several days to effect repairs while you were unconscious. I have also been building a comprehensive translation database using medical recordings and communications traffic. I believe I can now facilitate basic conversation between you and Commander. Did not fully understand what the voice was saying, but she caught some of the words. The strange device in the helmet was learning her language. Cole looked back at her. Penny says she can translate now, kind of. The AI repeated his words and its eyes went wide. She responded quickly, her words tumbling out in a rush of emotion. She says she is very glad you are awake, Penny translated. She says you are either the bravest warrior she has ever met or the most insane. She is not certain which. Cole laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his wounds. Probably both. Where am I? Explained through the AI. This was a military medical facility on IV. The Scourge had been driven back from this sector, at least for now. Her surviving soldiers were recovering in other parts of the station, and the High Command was very interested in speaking with the human who had fallen from the sky. High Command, Cole repeated. That sounds serious. It is, Penny said. Based on communications I have intercepted, your actions have caused quite a stir. The Dominion has had minimal contact with humanity until now. You appear to have made an impression. Spoke again, and Penny translated her words with careful precision. She wants to know why you did it, why you helped strangers you had never met, why you charged into certain death to save people who are not your species, not your people, not your concern. Cole was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the ceiling, thinking about the question. When he finally answered, his voice was soft. Where I come from, there's a saying. No one gets left behind. It doesn't matter if you're human or not. If someone needs help and you can give it, you give it. That's just how we are. Penny translated and listened intently. Her expression shifted as she absorbed his words, becoming something could not quite identify. Respect, perhaps, or wonder. She reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out his combat knife. The blade had been cleaned and sharpened, restored to perfect condition. She held it out to him with both hands, a gesture of formal significance. Cole shook his head. Keep it, you earned it. Hesitated, then slowly the knife, and held it against her chest. Her eyes were bright with emotion that she struggled to contain. Among my people, she said through Penny, warriors who fight together share a bond that cannot be broken. We call it Eth. It means blood of battle in your language. You and I have Eth now, Cole Bradley. We are connected until death and beyond. Cole smiled. I like the sound of that. The door to the medical room opened and entered, followed by several officers in formal uniforms. They stopped when they saw that Cole was awake, exchanging glances before approaching the bed. Human, said, his tone carefully neutral. I am General of the Dominion Military Command. I have many questions for you. Penny translated and Cole nodded. I'll answer what I can. The questioning went on for hours. Wanted to know everything about humans, about Earth, about the United Earth Navy and its capabilities. Cole answered honestly, sharing information that was not classified while politely declining to reveal military secrets. The general seemed to respect this, nodding approvingly at each diplomatic refusal. When the formal questions were finished, dismissed his officers and pulled a chair close to Cole's bed. His formal manner softened slightly. I have read the reports from the battlefield, he said. I have seen the recordings from our ship's sensors. You killed 93 Scourge warriors single-handedly. You broke through enemy jamming using nothing but willpower and a damaged communication device. You saved 4 of my soldiers from certain death. Cole shrugged, then winced again. I did what needed to be done. You did more than that. Leaned forward. The Dominion has been fighting the Scourge for 200 years. In that time, we have lost countless worlds and billions of lives. We have never encountered a species like yours. We have never seen warriors who fight the way you fight. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. My government wishes to open formal diplomatic relations with humanity. We believe an alliance between our peoples could benefit both sides greatly. And we would like you, Sergeant Bradley, to serve as a military liaison between our forces. Cole blinked in surprise. Me? I'm just a Marine. There are diplomats and politicians who handle this kind of thing. We do not want diplomats. We want someone who understands battle, someone who has proven himself in combat, someone our warriors can respect. Glanced at. Commander has already volunteered to be your counterpart. She has, I am told, refused any other assignment. Met Cole's eyes and nodded firmly. There was determination in her gaze, a fierce loyalty that needed no translation. Cole looked at her for a long moment, then he looked at. One condition, he said. Name it. I want Penny repaired properly. She saved my life out there. If I'm going to be a liaison, I need her functioning at full capacity. Smiled the first genuine smile Cole had seen from him. That can be arranged. Cole extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement, looked at it curiously for a moment, then reached out and grasped it. The alliance between humanity and the Dominion began in that moment, sealed with a handshake and witnessed by a warrior who had become something more than a stranger. 2 months had passed since the battle on the plains of IV. Cole stood on the observation deck of the orbital station, watching as a human cruiser emerged from faster-than-light travel and began its approach. The ship was called the Endeavor, and it carried the first official diplomatic delegation from Earth to the Dominion. He was wearing a new uniform now, one that combined elements of both human and military tradition. The fabric was weave, stronger and lighter than anything produced on Earth, but the rank insignia on his shoulder was unmistakably human. Lieutenant Cole Bradley, United Earth Navy, assigned to diplomatic liaison duty. The promotion had come through 3 weeks ago, along with a medal for valor and a personal commendation from the admiral of the fleet. Cole had accepted all of it with quiet humility. He had not done what he did for rewards or recognition. He had done it because it was right. Footsteps approached from behind. He did not need to turn around to know who it was. The human ship is beautiful, said, coming to stand beside him. Her accent was still strong, but her English had improved dramatically over the past weeks. She had been studying constantly, determined to communicate with Cole without relying on Penny for translation. It reminds me of a predator fish from the deep oceans of Mai, sleek and dangerous. Cole smiled. That's probably the nicest thing anyone has ever said about a naval cruiser. Returned the smile. She was wearing her formal uniform as well, the crimson and gold of the Scout Command. A new spear hung at her back, crafted by the finest smiths in the Dominion. The blade was made from an alloy that could cut through scourge armor like paper. The shaft was inscribed with symbols representing both her family lineage and her new alliance with humanity. And at her belt, in a custom sheath made specifically for it, she wore Cole's combat knife. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," Cole admitted. "These diplomats are going to want me to make speeches and attend ceremonies and shake hands with important people. I'd rather be back on the battlefield." War is simpler than politics. Much simpler. They watched the Endeavor draw closer. Escort ships from both fleets formed up around it, human and vessels flying in formation together for the first time in history. It was a sight that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Penny's voice came through Cole's earpiece. "Lieutenant, you have an incoming transmission from General. He wishes to remind you that the welcoming ceremony begins in 1 hour and that your attendance is mandatory." Cole sighed. "Tell him I'll be there." "I already did." He seemed skeptical. Laughed, a sound that Cole had come to appreciate more than he would ever admit. Her laugh was warm and genuine, so different from the grim warrior he had first met on that bloody battlefield. They had spent nearly every day together since his recovery. Training sessions, strategy meetings, long conversations about their respective cultures and histories. Cole had learned about the philosophy of honor and duty, about their ancient traditions and their long war against the scourge. Had learned about Earth, about its oceans and mountains and the billions of humans who called it home. They had become more than allies, more than colleagues. The bond she had spoken of in the medical bay had grown into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. "There is something I wish to give you," said. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. "The Smiths finished it yesterday. I have been waiting for the right moment." Cole took the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a pendant made from dark metal, shaped like two blades crossed over each other. One blade was curved in the style. The other was straight and practical, unmistakably human. "It represents our bond," explained. "Two warriors from different worlds fighting as one. I had one made for myself as well." She pulled aside the collar of her uniform to reveal an identical pendant hanging around her neck. "Among my people, this is the highest honor one warrior can give to another. It means I trust you with my life. It means I will stand beside you in any battle, against any enemy, until my final breath." Cole looked at the pendant in his hand. The metal was warm from his touch. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail perfect. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Then say nothing, just wear it." He placed the pendant around his neck and tucked it beneath his uniform. It rested against his chest, close to his heart, a reminder of everything they had been through and everything that lay ahead. The observation deck doors opened and an aide entered, looking flustered. "Lieutenant Bradley, Commander, the delegation is landing ahead of schedule. General requests your immediate presence at the docking bay." Cole and exchanged a look of shared amusement. Then they turned and walked together toward the docking bay, their footsteps falling into the same rhythm without conscious thought. The welcoming ceremony was everything Cole had feared. Speeches, handshakes, formal exchanges of gifts and promises. The diplomats spoke in careful phrases about mutual benefit and shared values, dancing around the real reason they were all here. The scourge were a threat to both species. Alliance was not just beneficial but necessary for survival. But amid all the formality, something real emerged. Cole watched as human and officers mingled, sharing drinks and stories through translators. He saw the beginnings of friendships forming, of trust being built one conversation at a time. This was how it started, not with treaties and documents, but with people simply getting to know each other. After the ceremony, Cole and escaped to a quiet balcony overlooking the station's central garden. The plants were all species, with deep purple leaves and flowers that glowed faintly in the artificial twilight. My government has approved a joint military operation, said, human and forces working together against the scourge. The first mission launches in 1 month. I heard they want me to lead the human contingent. And I will lead the scouts. She turned to face him directly. We will fight together again, Cole, as it should be. Cole nodded. The prospect of battle no longer felt like a burden. With beside him, it felt like coming home. Can I ask you something? He said. Always. Back on IV, when I crashed into that battlefield, you had every reason to see me as just another threat, another enemy. Why did you trust me? Considered the question carefully. I did not trust you, not at first. But when you looked at the scourge and then looked at me, I saw something in your eyes. Recognition. Understanding. You saw warriors in trouble and you chose to help without hesitation. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. She reached out and touched the pendant beneath his uniform. Humans are called by most of the galaxy. They fear you because you survive things that should kill you. They fear your strength and your resilience and your stubborn refusal to surrender. But they miss the truth of what makes you dangerous. What truth is that? You protect. His voice was soft but certain. You do not just fight to survive. You fight to protect others, complete strangers, aliens you have never met. You throw yourselves into danger not for glory or conquest, but because someone needs help. That is why the galaxy should fear you. Not because you are hard to kill, but because you will never stop trying to save those who cannot save themselves. Cole did not know how to respond. He stood in silence, feeling the weight of her words and the truth they carried. Smiled and took his hand. Come, there is more ceremony to endure, and I believe someone mentioned food. They walked back inside together, hand in hand. Two warriors from different worlds united by battle and bound by something stronger than blood. Above them, through the observation windows, human and ships continued to fly side by side. The first chapter of a new alliance had been written. Many more would follow. And it had all begun with a crash landing, a broken spear, and a human who simply refused to walk away from a fight.